We don't hand out the presidential suite to people like you. Her voice was sharp, flat, loud enough for every person in the Marble and Glass lobby to hear. The way she said it, with a kind of dry finality, like she wasn't delivering news, she was handing down a sentence. It hit like a slap. Not because it was shocking, but because deep down, Diane Morgan, 70 years old, retired public school teacher, mother of 3, grandmother of 6, had expected it. She was standing in the middle of the Lux Vista Hotel lobby in Midtown Manhattan. A place that smelled like eucalyptus water and entitlement. A place where every surface gleamed and every whisper mattered. A place that her daughter, Alana Morgan, had paid 5 figures to stay in. But somehow, none of that mattered right now. Before I take you deeper into what happened that afternoon, and what happened after, I need to ask you something. Megaphone, have you ever walked into a place you paid for, only to be treated like you don't belong? Have you ever stood somewhere you earned the right to be, and had someone try to make you feel small anyway? If you felt that, then don't scroll. Bell, hit the like button if this story already has your chest tight. Subscribe if you believe in quiet dignity over loud injustice. Drop your city in the comments, because what happened in Manhattan could happen anywhere. Now, let's go back to where it started. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3:04 p.m. to be exact. The heat outside was the thick, slow kind that turned streets into ovens. But inside the Lux Vista, it was ice-cold comfort. Towering ceilings, gold-veined marble floors. Water trickled softly behind a glass sculpture wall. Even the air felt expensive. Dr. Alana Morgan, 43, stepped through the automatic glass doors in heels that didn't clack. They whispered. She walked like a woman who had boardrooms waiting on her. But right now, she was just a daughter on vacation. By her side walked her mother, Diane. Pearl gray dress. Modest black flats. Her silver hair in a low, tight bun. Her posture? Straight as steel. She didn't look rich. She didn't care to. But the two of them together? That was the power no one saw coming. Sure you're comfortable here? Alana asked gently, bumping shoulders with her mom. Diane gave her a look. Honey, I used to scrub the marble in hotels like this. I'm not nervous. She paused. Just make sure you ask for the room with the corner window. Alana smiled. Already done. They approached the check-in desk. 2 employees. One typing. One scrolling. Neither looked up. Alana waited. 5 seconds. Then 10. Nothing. She finally leaned forward, her voice crisp, warm but firm. Good afternoon. We have a reservation, presidential suite. Alana Morgan. One woman, pale, mid-30s, tight bun, red lipstick, glanced up briefly. No smile. No welcome. Then, without a word, she turned and vanished through the back office. Alana blinked. That was weird. Diane tilted her head. Not the first time I've been treated like wallpaper. 3 minutes passed. Then the woman reemerged. This time, she wasn't alone. Behind her came another woman. She was taller, sharper, with heels like spears and a suit that looked like it came with a non-disclosure agreement. She walked like she was late for a disciplinary hearing, and someone was about to lose their job. Her name was Miranda Clark, floor manager. And from the moment her eyes landed on Alana and Diane, the whole temperature in the room dropped. She didn't smile, didn't introduce herself, just leaned down toward the employee and asked, They said they'd booked the presidential suite? Yes, came the reply. Miranda straightened, stared directly at Alana. And then she said it. We don't assign that suite to people like you. I don't care what you think you paid for. Just like that. Cold. Crisp. Designed to cut. The air in the lobby changed. A man in a beige linen blazer looked up from his espresso. A white woman in pearls lowered her phone mid-scroll. Even the concierge's smile faltered. Alana didn't move. Her mother's fingers tightened gently around her own, not from fear, but habit. Solidarity. Alana's voice was low. Excuse me? Would you repeat that? Miranda didn't flinch. Your kind of reservation doesn't go through this hotel. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a tech issue. It was intention. If you'd like to escalate this, you're welcome to contact the corporate office. That was the final line Emily Carter dropped before turning her back, not just on Naomi and Diane, but on every ounce of respect in that lobby. She didn't even wait for a reply. The dismissal was complete. Official. Brutal in its nonchalance. And just like that, a 70-year-old woman and her daughter stood motionless in the echo of humiliation. As if the walls themselves had absorbed the insult. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't demand apologies or reach for theatrics. No, she simply nodded once and said, "Okay, we'll step outside." But the way she said it, cool, deliberate, almost gentle, made it clear this was not retreat. It was repositioning. Emily never looked back. Neither did the front desk staff. The moment passed and was buried under silence, like dust under carpet. But just outside, on the polished concrete steps of Lux Vista, Manhattan, something ancient stirred in Diane Morgan's chest. Something passed from mother to daughter, not rage, not grief, but clarity. Restraint. Survival. She had felt it before, in schoolyards and city offices, in the mouths of men who called her Missy and meant something else. And now here it was again. A truth she thought her daughter had grown beyond. Diane's hand found Naomi's and tightened, not out of fear, but instinct. For a second, they stood in the churn of Manhattan. Taxi horns in the distance. The low roar of a delivery truck. A teenager laughing too loud across the street. But Naomi didn't hear any of it. All she could hear were those four loaded words still ricocheting inside her chest. People like you. She had heard them before. Just phrased differently. Are you sure you're in the right line? You speak so well. Do you work here? Each variation a chisel chipping away at her presence in a space she'd already earned. She blinked, centering herself. You all right? She asked softly, turning to her mother. Diane didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the gleaming glass panels of the hotel facade, their reflections faint, like shadows on water. I've been called worse, she said at last, voice low. But this time, it's different. They didn't know who you were. Naomi let out a slow breath through her nose. Exactly. Her purse opened with a quiet click. From it, she pulled out her phone. A sleek matte rectangle holding the tools of quiet war. Her fingers danced across the screen. 3 contacts. 3 calls. Telephone receiver legal. Public relations. Corporate risk and security. She wasn't panicked. She didn't need to be. Because true power doesn't scream. It whispers, and then walks through the front door with documentation. Inside the hotel, something was shifting. Nicole, the front desk associate, glanced nervously toward the glass. Naomi was still there outside. Still calm. Still watching. No yelling. No scene. But her presence was weight enough. Emily, meanwhile, had returned to her office, espresso in hand, oblivious to the ripple effect her words had triggered. Guests returned to their lattes, but the air had changed. It hummed with something unspoken. Then came the call. Naomi, pressing the phone to her ear, spoke quietly but firmly. Renee? Connect me with Sarah Chen at Legal. Immediately. And get Michael from HR on standby. We've got a live issue at Lux Vista, Manhattan. She didn't need to say more. Renee knew the tone. She'd heard it only once before, when Naomi had dismissed an entire board for leaking confidential equity figures. That day, 5 men lost 6-figure jobs before lunch. Renee understood. Naomi lowered the phone and turned to her mother. We're not leaving. Diane raised an eyebrow. You sure? Naomi nodded. You sit in the car. Stay cool. I'll be right back. Diane's gaze was steady, but there was a flicker, pride. I raised you to fight with your mind, not your voice, she said. Just remember, they don't expect you to come back. Naomi smiled. That's the best part. Inside, the cracks were beginning to show. By the fireplace, a woman with silver hair whispered to her husband. Isn't that Naomi Morgan? From Forbes? Her husband shrugged. But it wasn't just idle gossip. A bellhop whispered to Nicole. That's her, right? The tech CEO? The one who bought out part of Meridian Group? Nicole paled. No, it couldn't be. She would have had a security detail. Press. Something. But even as she said it, the certainty melted. Something about the woman's walk, the way she hadn't flinched, it was like gravity shifted when she moved. And then, the moment arrived. Oncoming automobile, a black Mercedes S-Class, eased to the curb. Its doors opened like punctuation. Two women stepped out in matching navy pantsuits. Behind them, a man in a charcoal blazer, eyes scanning, holding a silver tablet. No name tags. No smiles. Naomi followed. Her pace measured. Her face unreadable. Nicole stiffened. Other staff paused. Emily didn't notice, not yet. Naomi stepped back through the hotel doors, like she was returning to her own living room. And in a way, she was. Not because she owned the building, but because she built the reason people trusted it. Sparkle's respect, dignity, professional excellence. And today, all three had been shattered because her mother hadn't looked the part. Her heels clicked across the marble once, twice. Nicole stood straight, lips parted. Naomi opened her mouth. But before she could speak, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask." The words came from behind the desk again. And this time, Naomi didn't even blink. Naomi raised just one finger. Not to interrupt. Not to plead. But to signal that what came next wasn't a request. It was a fact. "My name is Dr. Naomi Ellis," she said clearly, each syllable landing with the weight of legacy. "I am the founder and majority shareholder of Lux Vista International." A sharp intake of breath cut through the lobby. "This hotel," she continued, "is part of my private real estate portfolio. I booked the presidential suite 2 weeks ago under my own name." Gasps didn't follow, just the kind of stunned, collective hush you only hear in cathedrals or courtrooms. Or here, now, in the lobby of a 5-star hotel built on curated image and quiet exclusion. Naomi shifted slightly, then gestured to the poised brunette now standing beside her. "This is Melissa Green, head of internal operations," she said. "She's here to begin an immediate internal audit. We're launching a full investigation into hospitality protocol, discriminatory misconduct, and staff behavior." Nicole, the front desk clerk who had smirked just 30 minutes earlier, stood frozen. Her lips parted, but whatever apology or explanation she thought to offer evaporated. A man nearby set his phone down, embarrassed. A middle-aged couple stopped mid-conversation. Someone dropped a pen. The silence wasn't empty. It was dense. Charged. Like static before lightning. Outside, in the quiet air of late afternoon, Diane Ellis watched it all unfold through the tinted window of Naomi's car. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't even smile. But deep in her chest, something shifted. Because this wasn't just a moment of triumph, it was vindication. For every hallway she'd been told to mop without being seen. For every white glove test that proved she had done her job better than anyone. For every sideways glance she'd endured at a boutique counter, a country club gate, a private school fundraiser. And now, here she was, not storming the building, not demanding justice, but witnessing her daughter walk in, name by name, title by title, until there was no denying what she was owed. Inside, the lobby was still flawless. Marble polished, orchids trimmed, a soft piano loop playing from invisible speakers. But the room itself? It had changed. Because when power walks in without needing to prove itself, people listen. Naomi didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't threaten. And that made her the most terrifying person in the room. Then came the final crack in the glass. From the office tucked near the elevators, Emily Carter, the manager who had delivered the insult so casually, re-emerged, still holding her espresso like nothing had happened. She glanced across the lobby. Stopped. Stared. Her smile faltered mid-step. There was Naomi, standing tall beside two sharply dressed professionals. One held a tablet, the other a leather-bound folder. Emily blinked, straightened her jacket, cleared her throat. She stepped forward, attempting something between grace and control. "Dr. Ellis," she said, forcing a smile. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't even look at her directly. "There has," she said, still calm. "You misunderstood who you were speaking to. And more importantly, who you were humiliating in front of a dozen guests." That smile Emily had tried to hold? It died on her face like a wilted flower. "If you'd like to be rebooked," she started. Naomi turned. One brow lifted. "Rebooked?" she asked. Her voice never rose, but something about her tone dropped like a stone into deep water. "Do you think this is about a room?" Emily swallowed. "I thought—" "You thought wrong," Naomi cut in. "You didn't just reject a reservation. You rejected a woman who worked 40 years in the school system, raised 3 children, and helped build the economy you benefit from." Naomi paused, then added, quieter but heavier, "You humiliated my mother." That one word, mother, echoed through the marble like a bell toll. Emily opened her mouth. No words came. "I didn't know," she finally managed. "And you didn't care to ask," Naomi replied. Then, from the side hallway, came the last face from earlier, Mark, the security guard. He'd been summoned before, to escort Naomi and Diane off the property. But now, he walked slowly, cautiously, unsure where to stand. Naomi didn't even glance at him. She didn't have to. His part in the story was already written. She turned back to Nicole. The woman's hands trembled, her fingers still resting on the keyboard like it could shield her from what was coming. "You looked me in the eye," Naomi said, "and still treated me like I was invisible." Nicole opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. "I will not be requesting a refund," Naomi said. "This is not about a transaction. It's about accountability." Melissa, her operations lead, nodded and tapped on her tablet. Behind her, a man in a gray suit handed Emily a sealed envelope. "What's this?" Emily asked, eyeing it like it might bite. "An executive reassignment notice," Naomi said plainly. "Effective immediately. Your key card has already been deactivated." The air sucked out of the room. "You're firing me?" Emily blinked, stunned. "No," Naomi replied. "I'm restructuring." She turned, walked toward the grand staircase that led to the upper suites. And as she moved, not a single person dared stand in her way. Not because they feared her, but because they'd just seen the real cost of underestimating someone based on appearance. I was just following protocol," Nicole murmured, the words falling limp as they left her lips. Naomi inhaled slowly, not to calm herself, she was already calm, but to draw attention to the pause. "Is that what you call it?" she asked softly. "Protocol? Is that what Lux Vista stands for now? Turning away black women because they don't look rich enough?" The word black cracked through the lobby like a bolt of truth. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't sugar-coated. Naomi said it with intention, out loud, unflinching, and just like that, the entire temperature of the room shifted. A nearby guest coughed into her glass. A man with a folded Wall Street Journal lowered it, eyes narrowing. And behind the front desk, Nicole's face turned pale. But Naomi didn't blink. She didn't apologize for making people uncomfortable. That was never her job. Outside, Diane still sat in the idling car, hands folded in her lap. But when she heard Naomi's voice from behind the tinted windows, strong, steady, undeniable, she reached into her bag and pulled out her glasses. She slid them on slowly, deliberately. If the world was going to see her, she'd see it back. Inside, a woman in a soft blue blouse, someone who had been sitting silently by the fireplace, slowly lifted her phone and began recording. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. Some moments demand to be documented. 2 others followed suit. From opposite corners of the room, guests began filming. Not for drama. Not for spectacle. But because, in their gut, they knew this was more than a hotel misunderstanding. This was a reckoning. Justice in 2025 often comes with a lens, and Naomi didn't stop them. She let it happen. Not because she needed attention, but because silence had never served women like her. And certainly not her mother. Emily Carter, now visibly unraveling, scanned the lobby and finally understood. This wasn't just a bad PR day. It was the unraveling of her authority, thread by thread. "I didn't mean," She tried again, reaching for her usual script. But Naomi raised a hand, not in anger, just command. "This isn't about what you meant," she said, her voice lowered but clear enough to echo. "It's about what you did, what you failed to see." Her eyes swept over the lobby, landing momentarily on every employee, every guest. "You saw 2 black women. You assumed they didn't belong. And then you made them leave." She paused. "That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. A loud one." It wasn't rage. It wasn't drama. It was truth, wrapped in control, spoken with surgical precision. Across the room, a guest set down his cocktail. A server near the bar stopped mid-pour. Even the elevator bell, when it dinged softly behind them, felt intrusive. That's how quiet it had become. "You're not just accountable to me," Naomi continued. "You're accountable to the very values printed on every Lux Vista brochure." She paused, just long enough to let the irony sink in. "Integrity. Excellence. Humanity." Just then, the front doors opened, and Diane Ellis stepped out of the car and into the sunlight. She didn't march. She didn't stomp. She glided. A quiet storm, wrapped in pearls and purpose. And when her shoes met the polished marble of the lobby floor, a collective awareness rippled through the crowd. This was the woman who had been turned away. This was the woman they had decided, based on nothing but her age and the color of her skin, didn't belong in their most prestigious room. And now she was walking back in, chin high, eyes steady. Naomi's posture softened. She extended a hand toward her mother, a gesture simple in action but seismic in meaning. And when Diane took it, the entire lobby seemed to breathe in at once. A woman at the bar gasped softly. Not theatrically, but like someone who just realized they had been watching the wrong side of history. Naomi turned to the room again. "This is my mother," she said, voice even. "Her name is Diane Ellis. She taught school for 30 years. In buildings without working AC. With books so old they still listed Alaska as a U.S. territory. She raised 3 kids, paid off her mortgage early, and gave her entire life to her community." Diane now stood beside her, hands folded calmly. "She didn't come here to ask for favors. She came to enjoy a night of peace, one she earned. And instead, you made her feel unwelcome." Naomi took a step forward. Her voice didn't rise, but her words grew heavier, fuller. "You didn't ask her name. You didn't ask her story. You just decided she wasn't enough." Silence. Stillness. Not even the soft classical music playing over the speakers could soften what had just been said. Naomi turned to her mother and whispered, "You okay?" Diane gave a slow, regal nod. "I am now." Across the room, a woman in a green scarf hit the Go Live button. To her followers, she whispered, "I didn't mean to start filming, but y'all need to see this. This hotel just tried to remove the CEO of the company that owns it." And just like that, the moment was no longer private. The story had escaped the lobby. It moved onto timelines and group chats, feeds and forums, carried by shock and justice and digital fire. Naomi could feel it. The way people's eyes shifted. The way whispering turned into watching. The way shame clung to some and awe clung to others. But Naomi didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply stood there, a black woman, a daughter, a CO, refusing to shrink. She turned back toward the staff, her voice still low, but unmistakably firm. "Let me make this clear," Naomi said, her eyes first locking with Emily's, then Nicole's. "You didn't just disrespect a guest. You disrespected the woman who made me who I am. And in doing that, you disrespected me." A quiet fell over the lobby like snowfall, soft but smothering. Naomi let the silence stretch. "And I don't forget things like that." Nicole parted her lips to speak, but whatever excuse she rehearsed collapsed under the weight of her own regret. Nothing she could say now would unspool the moment, not after it had burned itself into every eye watching. Emily straightened slightly, as if posture could undo shame, but the power had already left her. That's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't reverse. Not with a weak smile. not with a belated apology. And especially not when the moment has been witnessed by dozens in real time, and now hundreds more through phone cameras and live streams. This wasn't just a customer service error. It was a historic wound reopened in a luxury hotel lobby on a Thursday afternoon, a flashpoint soaked in legacy, pride, and quiet resistance. From the back of the room, a young man, no more than 22, whispered to his girlfriend, "That's her, Naomi Ellis. She was on the cover of Inca last year." He stared, awe in his voice. She turned a $200,000 business loan into a hotel empire. They treated her like she was invisible. His girlfriend nodded, eyes wide. "That's not just a mistake," the young man added. "That's legacy blindness." Even though he didn't say it loud enough to echo, it traveled. Truth always does. This wasn't about a reservation. It never was. It was about a belief so baked into society that even now, in the era of inclusion and hashtags, people like Diane were still mistaken for less. Naomi took a measured breath, then stepped forward. The hush followed her like a tide. She reached into her handbag and slowly removed her identification. Not a driver's license. Not a credit card. But a gold-foil corporate badge, the kind issued only to senior executive officers. It shimmered slightly under the lobby light. Bold font. Lux Vista logo. And one name. Dr. Naomi Ellis. She placed it on the counter with a quiet finality. "You see this?" she said, her voice even but commanding. "This badge grants me access to every door in this company. It allows me to hire, to fire, to rewrite policy, and to walk unannounced into any of our properties." She paused. "And yet, you didn't recognize it, because it was worn by someone you didn't expect." She looked up. "That is what bias looks like." Nicole had gone pale. Emily looked toward the hallway behind her, desperate for a lifeline. But there were no back doors left. No script prepared for this. One of Naomi's assistants leaned in quietly and whispered into her ear. She nodded once. The press team was already compiling video footage. Legal had begun drafting statements for the board. HR had issued soft notices. Exit conversations were being prepared. But Naomi wasn't done. Not yet. She glanced toward the growing crowd in the lobby. Tourists, business travelers, wealthy patrons, curious staff. Nearly all of them were watching. Some with sympathy, others with embarrassment. All of them with attention. "If any of you were recording," Naomi said, voice steady but resonant, "don't stop." She turned slightly to face the room. "People need to see how fast dignity is dismissed when it doesn't come wrapped in the package society expects. This is what it looks like when bias wears a suit and smiles at the front desk." And then she did something no one expected. She turned, not toward Emily, not toward Nicole, but toward everyone else. Toward the guests in their finely pressed suits. Toward the women in luxury scarves and designer heels. Toward the man sipping an $18 cocktail, and the couple still holding hands near the elevator. "Let me ask you something," she said. "If I hadn't come back, if I had taken my mother, walked out, and never returned, how many of you would have even noticed what happened?" The question dropped like glass shattering. "How many of you would have assumed the staff was right? That we were the ones causing trouble? That we didn't belong?" No one responded. They didn't have to. Because that's what silence really says. And then a voice rose. Soft, shaky, but certain. "I would have noticed," said Sarah Lynn, the guest who had gone live earlier. She stepped forward, still holding her phone. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything when it happened. But I'm saying it now." Naomi met her gaze and nodded. Not with forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Truth recognizes truth. Then Diane spoke. Her voice raspier now, but rich with decades of earned wisdom. "This isn't the first time someone tried to erase me," she said quietly. "And it won't be the last. But today, I'm grateful you all saw it. She turned slightly towards Sarah's camera and added, "Don't let this be a moment. Let it be a memory that moves you." Naomi gently squeezed her mother's hand. And just like that, the lobby no longer felt like a hotel. It felt like a courtroom, a classroom, a mirror, and everyone inside was being asked, without force, without shame, to see themselves fully. Naomi turned to Diane once more and held out her hand. It wasn't a gesture of retreat. It was a gesture of completion. Diane took it without hesitation, and together they began walking side by side through the same lobby that had tried, not long ago, to make them disappear. The marble floor, once cold and echoing, now felt like a runway, a witness stand, a place where history had paused just long enough to take notes. There was no music anymore, no soft piano drifting in the background. Someone had turned it off, or maybe it had simply fallen silent, because sometimes the truth is louder than any soundtrack. And now everyone was listening. Even the clinking of glasses at the bar had gone quiet. No one dared whisper. As Naomi and Diane walked past the front desk, not a single eye met theirs. There was no need for a backward glance. Naomi didn't seek one final confrontation. Her message had already landed. Clean, precise, devastating. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The silence in their wake said everything that words couldn't. And in that silence, they didn't walk like victims. They walked like women who had never needed permission to exist in a space they'd already earned. At the grand double doors, the bellhop finally moved. He had stood frozen earlier, caught between instinct and hesitation, but now, quietly, he stepped forward and pulled them open. He didn't speak. He didn't bow. But his eyes met Diane's, then Naomi's, and in them was a quiet apology. The kind that doesn't beg forgiveness, but acknowledges its absence. Outside, the city resumed its noise like nothing had happened. A yellow cab honked. A bus exhaled at the corner. Sneakers squeaked on pavement, phones buzzed with updates, and life on Fifth Avenue continued like it always had. But for the two women standing under the overhang of Lux Vista Manhattan, the world had shifted. Naomi paused under the hotel's stone arch. Her eyes lifted slowly to the name etched into the building, Lux Vista. The letters were tall and gleaming. For years, she'd been proud of them. Now, she measured them against what had just happened. She took a breath, then turned to Diane. "You all right?" Diane gave her a soft smile. "I was fine the minute you walked back in there," she said. Then her smile widened just a little. "But I'll admit, seeing their faces when you said your name, that felt good." Naomi exhaled a short laugh, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. "I try not to enjoy that part," she said, but they both knew the truth. Some moments, some victories, you don't chase them, but when they come, you feel them. The black Mercedes rolled up, quiet and polished. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Naomi gestured gently, and Diane moved first, stepping into the car with the same grace she'd carried all her life. Naomi stayed back for a few more seconds. She turned one last time toward the hotel. Through the lobby glass, she could see Emily Carter still standing at the front desk, stiff and motionless, like someone awaiting judgment. Naomi didn't wave. She didn't nod. She just looked. And that was enough. Then she slid into the back seat beside her mother, closed the door, and leaned back. The engine hummed softly beneath them. Diane reached over and rested her hand on Naomi's forearm. "You did right," she said gently, "even if they never admit it." Naomi nodded once. She wasn't waiting for them to admit anything. She had moved on to something else entirely. She picked up her phone. The screen lit up with alerts, messages from legal, internal affairs, comms, social platforms. Sarah Lynn's live stream had already gone viral. Comments poured in by the second. One headline read, "CO told she's not the type for her own hotel chain." The comment section was fire and fury. "This happens every day to people who aren't COs. one woman wrote. Naomi paused. Read it again. Twice. Then she whispered, Exactly. Because that was the point. This wasn't about her. Not really. The car pulled from the curb, drifting through late afternoon Manhattan traffic. Diane sat quietly, watching the city blur past. Her face, for the first time in a long time, showed both peace and reflection. Naomi was still scanning messages, still thinking. But her thoughts weren't on tweets or trending videos. Her thoughts were on consequence. Not performative consequence, the kind that stops at a PR apology and a carefully worded email. No. She was focused on real change. Systemic correction. Because dignity, true dignity, costs something. And today, that price had been crossed. She tapped her Bluetooth earpiece. I want full employee reports, she said to the assistant on the other line. Pull files for every staff member on duty today. HR is to issue formal termination letters to Emily Carter and Nicole Harris before close of business. A pause. Then more. I want our training protocols rewritten. From the top down. That includes bias sensitivity, racial equity, and every front desk policy across all Lux Vista locations. If there's anything that leaves room for this kind of failure again, I want it gone. Her voice didn't rise. It never had to. Her tone was exact. Measured. The tone of someone who had built a business not through fury, but through foresight. Diane turned and looked at her daughter. Naomi had always been strong. Always determined. But today, Diane saw something else. A kind of focused fire. Not the fire of anger, but legacy. Not the kind written on paper, but the kind built in posture. In silence. In resolve. I remember when you were 12, Diane said softly. You came home crying because your teacher accused you of cheating. Said your answers were too good to be your own? Naomi smiled faintly. And you made me rewrite the whole essay and turn it in again. Said if I was going to prove them wrong, I'd better do it twice. Diane nodded. And look at you now. There was no pride in her voice. Not the kind you boast about. It was deeper. Wiser. The car slowed, rounding a corner onto Madison Avenue. Naomi's office tower loomed ahead. Steel and glass, cutting into the sky. But she didn't look up. She looked at Diane. You shouldn't have to go through that, she said, barely above a whisper. Not now. Not at this stage in your life. Diane shook her head slowly. Baby, I shouldn't have had to go through that at any stage in my life. Then she smiled. But if the world still hasn't learned, maybe this time, they'll learn the hard way. And with that, the car rolled forward into the golden light of early evening. Naomi nodded slowly, her face a quiet mask of control. No triumph. No relief. Just resolve. The black car pulled up in front of her building. Her driver opened the door and stepped out, but Naomi didn't move, not yet. She turned in her seat and looked out the rear window one last time. Her gaze traveled down Madison Avenue, back in the direction of Lux Vista, Manhattan. She didn't blink. She didn't scowl. But if you could hear what her eyes were saying, they would have whispered one thing. This isn't over. It wasn't even close. Exactly 22 minutes later, the front doors of Lux Vista swung open again, but this time, the silence inside broke like glass. Naomi Ellis had returned. But not alone. She entered the lobby with a purpose so sharp it sliced through every whisper, every sideways glance, every ounce of lingering doubt. Flanked by her executive operations team, 2 internal legal officers, and a compliance liaison from corporate headquarters, she didn't have to say a word. Her presence said everything, and it landed like thunder. Every employee froze. The bellhop stiffened near the back wall. The elevator dinged, but no one moved. Even the cocktail waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes stopped mid-step, unsure if he was still supposed to be serving anything. Naomi didn't wait for introductions. She didn't need a red carpet or a mic. All she needed was this moment, and the truth. Her heels hit the marble like metronomes. Click, click, click. The sound that power makes when it's not asking for attention, it commands it. Behind her, Melissa Green, her trusted operations executive, held a brown envelope in one hand and a company-issued tablet in the other. To Naomi's left was Andrew Wallace, Lux Vista's general counsel. He was calm, seasoned, in a gray tailored suit that gave nothing away but preparedness. Naomi stopped right in front of the front desk, the exact place where her mother had been humiliated. She didn't pause because she needed direction. She paused because it was symbolic. Her eyes settled on Nicole Harris, the front desk attendant. Nicole's hands trembled against the keyboard. The mouse slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the desk like a gavel calling for order. She knew what this was. She just didn't know how final it would be. Naomi spoke, voice even, unshaken. "Miss Harris," she began, not loudly but with the authority of someone who had earned the weight of every syllable. "Your employment with Lux Vista International is terminated. Effective immediately." Nicole's eyes widened. She opened her mouth. Whether to plead or explain, no one would ever know, because Naomi continued, without so much as a breath. "This decision is not emotional. It is procedural. You failed to verify a reservation. You escalated without cause. You made discriminatory assumptions about a guest based solely on appearance. And that guest, as it turns out, is my mother." Gasps rippled behind her. Again. Melissa placed the brown envelope gently on the counter. "This includes your severance paperwork and your exit protocol," Naomi continued. "You will be escorted by security to retrieve your personal belongings. You are to vacate the premises within the hour." Nicole didn't speak. She couldn't. Her lips trembled, her face pale. She nodded once. Slow. Mechanical. Naomi didn't wait for thanks. She turned next toward the hallway, where Emily Carter, the floor manager, stood stiffly. Her jaw clenched so hard her molars could have cracked. Her arms were crossed, but her posture had already given way to defeat. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't change her pace. "Miss Carter," she said clearly, "you will not return to your position as front office manager. Your conduct violated Lux Vista hospitality protocol. Your actions reflected neither the excellence nor the dignity this brand demands." Emily tried to speak, but Naomi raised a hand. "This is not a conversation." "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Across the lobby, guests had begun to gather. Some leaned over balcony rails. Others whispered into phones. A few were filming, quietly, discreetly, but with purpose. Naomi wasn't performing for them. She was protecting what she built. Not with outrage, but with order. She turned to Melissa. "Begin HR intake with the remaining staff. Those who stood silent will be retrained or replaced. I want a full personnel audit by end of day. The next 30 days are about correction, not comfort." Melissa nodded, already moving. Naomi let her eyes sweep across the lobby. Not as someone seeking approval, but as someone reclaiming ownership. This space, once built for exclusion, now had a new master. "This hotel," she said softly, almost to herself, "doesn't just belong to the wealthy. It belongs to those who protect what it represents." She turned and walked down the hallway, past the elevators, past the portraits of smiling executives on the wall, past the very systems that once protected people like Emily and Nicole. And as she passed a young black concierge, someone who hadn't dared speak, she paused for just a moment and gave a nod. A signal. "I saw you. You matter. We're rebuilding this the right way." Later that evening, the presidential suite, once denied to her mother, was glowing with soft amber light. Inside, the orchids were fresh. A handwritten note from the staff now rested on the pillow. And beside the panoramic window were 2 fluted glasses of sparkling cider, untouched. Naomi stood on the balcony, silent. Below her, Manhattan buzzed like it always had. A living, breathing symphony of ambition and contradiction. But she didn't hear it. Not really. Her mind was elsewhere. On policies. on apologies, on accountability. Behind her, the room was perfect, spotless, comfortable, expensive, but none of that mattered as much as what had been taken and reclaimed over the last few hours. She leaned on the railing, closed her eyes, and finally exhaled. The sky outside had turned slate gray, the kind of evening hue that feels like quiet thunder, heavy and still. The air carried a faint chill, the city's breath rolling through the rooftop like a whispered reminder. This happened. This mattered. Naomi stood on the balcony, posture upright but no longer tense. For the first time that day, her face showed fatigue. Not from defeat, but from restraint. Because staying composed when the world tries to humiliate you? That's not easy. That's endurance. That's power. Behind her, the sweet sliding door opened with a soft shhhh, and Diane stepped out, wrapped in a cream shawl. Her heels were off, her hair down, and her face, finally, at peace. Neither of them spoke at first. They stood side by side, 2 generations of survival and strategy, watching the skyline like sentries. Between them, a silence that wasn't empty, it was full. Full of memory, of triumph, of everything that had tried and failed to break them. Naomi was the first to speak. "I kept thinking today," she said quietly. "What if I hadn't gone back? What if I just walked away like they wanted me to?" Diane didn't look at her, not right away. She just nodded, slow and knowing. "Then they would have won," she replied. "And they wouldn't have even known it." Naomi exhaled. Long measured. Her voice softened further. "But they didn't win," she said. "Not this time." Diane took her daughter's hand. Her grip was gentle, but firm enough to anchor her. "No," she said. "This time they learned." Naomi turned to face her fully now. "I didn't build all this to be rich," she said. "I built it because I was tired. Tired of watching us get turned away. Tired of watching you be treated like less." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't pull back. "I built this because I wanted something that couldn't be taken away the minute we walked through the door." Diane's eyes glistened. "And you did," she said. "You build a world where we stay, where we don't have to ask if we belong. We just do." Naomi didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Behind them, Naomi's phone buzzed again. A new wave of texts. Legal updates. Board messages. News alerts. The PR team had drafted statements. Policy reform was underway. Her inbox was a wall of momentum. Viral hashtags already top trending. Hashtag this is what bias looks like. Hashtag dignity is non-negotiable. Hashtag Naomi Ellis. The live stream had crossed 3.7 million views in 6 hours. But Naomi didn't pick up her phone. This moment wasn't about optics. It wasn't about press. It was about the one thing no institution can buy back once it's lost: respect. Across town, journalists were dissecting every frame of the footage. News anchors were analyzing policy failures. But here on the balcony, it was just mother and daughter. And legacy. Naomi finally turned to Diane again, voice barely above a whisper. "I want young women, women who look like us, to know they don't have to rise in silence anymore. That their voices aren't a liability. They're leverage. And when they speak, the room changes. The world changes." Diane nodded slowly. "Then you keep doing what you're doing," she said. "And I'll be right here, watching you take back every space they ever tried to keep from us." They stood a little longer in that city air, the noise of Manhattan steady below. Horns. Distant music. Someone arguing at a hot dog cart. It was all there. The chaos of a city still learning how to grow. Then Naomi stepped back. She opened the balcony door. Held it for her mother. And Diane walked through, slow, proud, unbothered. Naomi followed. And when the door shut behind them, it didn't just close on a bad day. It closed on a chapter. And in its place, a movement had begun. Not for revenge. Not for recognition. But for restoration. For every mother who'd ever been humiliated. For every daughter who'd ever stayed quiet. And for everyone who ever needed to be reminded that respect doesn't wear a name tag. And power? Power doesn't shout. It walks in, quietly corrects you, and rewrites the rules. Forever. And now I want to speak directly to you. Wherever you're watching from, on a phone, on a bus, late at night in your living room. Have you ever been dismissed before you opened your mouth? Ever had someone look at you and decide you didn't belong? Then know this. Silence is no longer your only option. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove anything. But when the moment comes, stand tall. Speak. Let your presence be enough. Because what Naomi Ellis did today wasn't magic. It was muscle, built from years of injustice, and a refusal to let it define her story. Pushpin if this story moved you. Like it. Share it. Comment below with your city or state. Let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe. Because stories like this don't just deserve to be told. They deserve to be remembered.